Team members here are trained in a variety of disciplines and monitor all of the space station systems. And just like mission control at SpaceX, we have someone dedicated to talk to the crew members to streamline communications. This keeps the astronauts from needing multiple conversations on different subjects. This role is the CAPCOM, which stands for Capsule Communicator. However, this person isn't actually talking with the spacecraft. That's SpaceX's core. The Capcom is speaking with the astronauts already living aboard the International Space Station. And the Capcom does sit right next to the flight director. The flight director gathers information and data from all flight controllers and leads the team through major milestones. They approve or decline suggestions based on pre-established flight rules. Other key members include the ADCO, who controls the attitude or orientation of the space station. We also have the visiting vehicle officer, or VVO, who monitors the work and works with external teams sending spacecraft to and from the International Space Station. There's also a flight surgeon who works with the astronauts to get a chance to speak with them on a regular schedule on private medical conferences. We also have Robo, who works with the Canadarm2 to maneuver it to complete work outside of the space station. When astronauts are on a spacewalk, the Canadarm2 is maneuvered by an astronaut within the International Space Station. And there are many other positions and team members who monitor the station's solar arrays, the astronauts' schedules, and even where every single piece of equipment and cargo is stored. So it takes a tough and competent team to make a mission successful. And we now are in entry interface and do have that loss of signal with the crew. Again, this is expected as they make their way through the Earth's atmosphere. It will last just a few minutes, and then we'll begin to hear the ground call up to the crew for a comm check. Sometimes that comes a little sooner than expected, sometimes a little later. It just depends. But we do expect to regain communications with the crew once we are out of this entry interface period.
Right now, the crew on board Dragon Endeavour, of course, our team of Crew-8, the 3 NASA astronauts and 1 Roscosmos cosmonaut, they are themselves monitoring the entry phase. They are following along with the touchscreen on the inside of the pressurized section, that touchscreen monitor that they continue to follow progress with. Earlier, we saw it as the 4 forward thrusters were firing during the deorbit burn. So now they continue to monitor that. They are adjusting their cameras in preparation for drogue chute deploy. They are also continuing to monitor velocity and basically keep tabs on how things are progressing. Like we mentioned, the period of loss of communication, which is what we are now in, we anticipate that to end, also known as AOS, or acquisition of signal. We expect that to occur at 12:23 a.m. Pacific time, 3:23 a.m. Eastern time. We might hear SpaceX core begin to hail the crew a little bit before that. We also might hear our commander, Matt Dominic, also say hey before we even begin hailing them. So this period of blackout varies from mission to mission. It's not super precise, so we will attempt to regain those communications at the earliest reasonable opportunity, but this is totally expected. This is what happens every time we bring a Dragon capsule back through to Earth. The temperatures can reach upward of 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. This is why we see, once the Dragon splashes down, we see that the exterior, which was a nice pristine white at liftoff, and while it was on orbit, it becomes more like a toasted marshmallow after it comes back. We see that thermal protection system having done its job in protecting the structure of the capsule, as well as the astronauts inside. So for those that have recently joined us, we are in the expected blackout period. We anticipate this to end at 12:23 a.m. Pacific. The team there on your screen located at SpaceX Mission Control here in Hawthorne, California, as well as the team in Houston at Johnson Space Center, continue to monitor. Like I said before, the Crew-8 team is also monitoring using their systems as well. Prior to this prior to this dynamic event, they had already closed their visors. They had already stored the tablets and any other loose items, including the zero-G indicator, of course. So they are well prepared. And like we mentioned, they will remain in their suits until after they splash down and after the recovery team retrieves them from the water and helps them egress from the capsule. Once again, we are anticipating a splashdown off the coast of Florida near Pensacola, so in the on the Gulf side of Florida. Our recovery vessel Megan is standing by, waiting for the Crew-8 cohort to return. The recovery team, actually, there's our first view of Dragon Endeavour making its streaking appearance across the sky. This view comes to us from the recovery vessel, Megan, as I mentioned earlier.
And we actually do have a very special guest, Shaniqua Vereen, a public affairs officer at the Johnson Space Center. She's on the boat right now. Shaniqua, can you hear us okay? And let us know what you are seeing right now as we watch Crew-8 streak through the atmosphere about to splash down. Let us know what you're seeing.
Yes, Sandra. Hi. I hope you guys can hear me loud and clear. I am on the recovery vessel Megan, as you stated. We are getting our first views here on the ship as well. I'm with NASA photographer who is seeing the navigation lights as well as the streaking across the sky. It's a pretty exciting time right now on the recovery vessel. All personnel that's not on the FAST are up at the front of the hull of the ship, just watching it as it comes in. Again, the Megan is stationed about 3 miles, about 1.5 nautical miles away from the splashdown zone, and we're looking to have the crew splash down in just about, 6 minutes, 5-6 minutes? And so we're catching all the views until the parachutes deploy and they splash down in the ocean.
That is so excellent, Shaniqua. I am jealous of the view. I mean, it's beautiful on our screen, but I can't even imagine what it looks like in person. So soak that in, enjoy that moment. We are expecting to regain communications from the crew in about a minute or so. We might start to hear some of those calls out from the ground or from Matt Dominic, the commander of Crew Dragon Endeavour, as they come out of this blackout period. But again, we're continuing to get great views of Crew-8 as they are re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Again, standing by to regain those communications, expecting that in about a minute or so.
Dragon SpaceX, comm check.
Wow, clear. How?
We have you the same.
Great news there. Communication blackout period over. We heard the voice of Commander Matthew Dominic. Now coming up at 12:25 a.m. Eastern, or excuse me, Pacific, 3:25 a.m. Eastern, we will deploy the drogue parachutes. Now, frame of reference, prior to the period, coming through the Earth's atmosphere.
Dragon is on GPS. Expect automated chute deployment at nominal altitude.
Dragon copies.
All right, just a call out there, letting the crew know how Dragon is calculating the when and how to release the parachute. So the drogue chutes are going to come out first. There are 2 of them. This occurs around when the capsule is going about 350 miles per hour or so, roughly about there. Those will deploy, and then about a minute or 2 later, the main parachutes. About a minute later, the main parachutes will deploy. Roughly about there. And at that point in time, the capsule will be going about 120 or so miles per hour. So those drogue parachutes do quite a bit of work as well to help stabilize and slow the Dragon capsule down. So standing by now for deployment of the drogue parachutes.
Brace for drogue window.
Dragon bracing.
And this view again is from the WB-57. That's one of our high altitude planes as it continues to track Dragon ahead of those drogue parachutes being deployed. And shortly after that, we'll see the main parachutes deployed. But we'll stand by for those drogues to go ahead and get deployed. We are hearing that Dragon has good pitch and yaw stability, so everything continuing to go really smoothly, targeting that splashdown at 12:29 a.m. Pacific time, so just about 4 minutes or so from now.
Once again, there we can see that the drogue parachutes, thanks to that WB-57 views, drogues are deployed. We can see two good-looking drogues. Oh, this is a great view from inside the parachute bay where those drogue parachutes...
Drogue chute descent rate nominal.
Next,
Dragon copies.
those drogue chutes will next pull out the main parachutes, and we'll see those 4 main parachutes open and inflate. Once again, Dragon we can see deployment there of the 4 main parachutes. Dragon is doing this autonomously, releasing each set of parachutes. We can now see those 4 main parachutes begin to inflate. Pretty incredible to see how, as those main parachutes inflate, the capsule itself slows down even more significantly.
Main chute descent rate nominal.
Copy. Nominal descent rate 1,000 meters.
Copy, 1,000.
We will continue to hear call-outs from Commander Matt Dominic of the distance from the water. Those parachutes really doing their job now, as you mentioned, Kate, starting to slow the spacecraft down even more and more. By the time the crew actually does splash down in the water, they'll be going about 15, 16 miles per hour. So those parachutes really taking on that air to slow down the spacecraft.
800 meters.
Copy, 800.
Like you said, Commander, Matt Dominic will continue to report altitude every 200 meters. So we just heard the 800 meter call out.
And we also heard that the descent rate was nominal or as expected. Another good call.
100 meters.
A good call out there.
Copy, 600.
Continuing to get great views from the WB-57 as Crew-8 is nearing splashdown.
400 meters.
Copy, 400.
Meters, bracing.
Copy, 200 and braced.
At this point in time, the seats in Dragon have rotated a little bit to help provide a more comfortable and safer bodily orientation for the crew members as they come closer to splashdown. Like we said before, the capsule's going about 15 or 16 miles per hour.
And splashdown.
And Endeavour, we see the same. On behalf of SpaceX, welcome home.
And as you can see on your screen, we do have visual confirmation.
And NASA team, what an incredible ride.
Again, we do have visual confirmation of Crew-8 successfully splashing down after 235 days in space. They are now back on Earth. Dragon Endeavour has returned home, and NASA astronauts Matt Dominic, Mike Barrett, and Jeanette Epps, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gurbankin are back on Earth after an approximately 34-hour return journey from space.
As you can see, SpaceX recovery ship and team have been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they're now making their way to the splashdown location. Teams have been ready and waiting about 3 nautical miles away, so it's going to take about 30 minutes for them to make their way to Matthew, Michael, Jeanette, and Alexander. They're inside Dragon. We can see there the recovery lights shining some light onto the Dragon capsule. Now, immediately after splashdown, the Dragon capsule automatically cuts the lines.
Dragon, we share water. Operating flight control state.
SpaceX copies. We see the same.
So that was just Commander Matt Dominic reporting the orientation in which Dragon is now in, which we see there on your screen. Like I mentioned before, the Dragon capsule automatically cuts.
SpaceX, we stable 1.
Copy and concur. Stable 1.
Dragon automatically cuts the lines to the parachutes, so we will see some of the recovery team in the fast boats, which are now approaching the splashdown site. We'll see a couple of those boats divert over to where the parachutes landed, as we will retrieve those from the water. We will also see a fast boat approach the Dragon capsule. That team is responsible for making sure that there are no remaining hypergolic residue on the capsule after it has spent significant time in space. Those hypergolic propellants are what are used to maneuver Dragon on orbit, and they are toxic to people here on Earth. And so we want to make sure that the recovery team is safe, so we'll see that fast boat approach and perform initial safety checks to make sure there are no hypergolic residuals there on the exterior of the capsule. We'll then see that team begin to rig up the Dragon capsule with some fittings, some straps that will ultimately be utilized to lift the capsule on board our recovery vessel, Megan.
And we did have a good view there just a minute ago, and you can kind of see it here. The water is almost mirror-like. It's quite smooth. Very beautiful weather there off the coast of Pensacola for these recovery operations. So as you mentioned, they are going to begin to assess capsule safety. We do see some of those fast boats begin to approach, and they're going to do some of those sniff checks, make sure that everything is as expected before they continue with the operations of bringing Dragon closer to the recovery vessel and then eventually lifting it on. So we are now eagerly awaiting the recovery of our Dragon spacecraft with NASA astronauts Matt Dominic, Mike Barrett, and Jeanette Epps, as well as Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gurbankin inside. So Dragon has already autonomously completed several steps to safe itself following splashdown, and we are continuing to see those views of the fast boats. They do have the go to approach. So for those of you just joining us, the mission has gone smoothly so far. Dragon successfully splashed down off the coast of Pensacola at 12:29 a.m. Pacific, 3:39 a.m. Eastern this morning.
SpaceX is go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside in approximately 1 minute.
Okay. You guys are fast.
I always love that call out because, you know, it is not common to have people on the outside of your spaceship. So I love that we just give the team a heads up that they should expect people to begin climbing around their Dragon capsule. Now, approximately 34 hours ago, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station, completed a series of departure burns, jettisoned its trunk section, And then, as we saw just a little bit ago, performed its final burn, the deorbit burn, which placed the Dragon capsule on a trajectory toward Pensacola, Florida. Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes to slow the spacecraft down to a gentle splashdown. So we're now going to follow along with the final part of Matthew, Michael, Jeanette, and Alexander's journey as Dragon is prepared to be lifted out of the water and placed on the recovery boat.
And you might have heard a call out a couple of minutes ago for something called Stable 1. There's a couple of different configurations that Dragon can land in. Stable 1 is the configuration that we are hoping for. So this means it's in the ocean and upright as expected, as you see on your screen as the lights do shine on it. So those fast boats continuing to approach and get closer. These will be the first human beings that Crew-8 has seen outside of their spacecraft since they were being strapped in ahead of launch by the closeout team at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So upon detection of landing, Dragon automatically did release the main parachutes to prevent wind from pulling the spacecraft. And then Dragon automatically safed its pyrotechnics still present on the spacecraft and automatically performed additional minor system reconfigurations if needed. So the astronauts will remain seated and in their spacesuits at this point, but the onboard air conditioning keeps things temperature regulated inside the spacecraft so they can be comfortable, and the communication systems on board remain powered so the crew can continue to communicate, and we'll likely hear some of those calls back and forth from the ground to the crew inside Endeavour.
Yeah, you mentioned the automatic cutting of those parachute lines. We often talk about how Dragon is autonomous and how it does things itself, but the crew is always there monitoring and ensuring that things are going as planned. So actually, one of the first actions that they have upon splashdown is to listen for the cutting of those lines. And so if for some reason we confirm that the parachutes were unable to be released, the crew inside has the ability to do that manually. So just because they splash down doesn't mean their job is over. Now, in this view here, we can see some of the recovery team there in the fast boats that got that go to approach. We have 2 fast boats in the recovery fleet, which you see there, that have moved rather quickly to that splashdown point. They are being followed by one of the main recovery vessels, which will move into position upwind of the spacecraft. We put it upwind just in case there are any residual hypergolic elements there on the exterior of the capsule. So putting the larger recovery vessel upwind before having the confirmation that there are no residuals. Key safety check there. The 2 fast boats have very specific roles. Their first view of our second fast boat. The first one is focused on immediate safety inspection of the spacecraft integrity and checking for any presence of those hypergolic propellant vapors. And this helps ensure that it's safe for the recovery vessel to approach Dragon as well as the rest of the recovery team. Once Dragon...
Hypergol sweeps and unfired ordnance checks are nominal. Rigging is in progress. Approximately 25 minutes until capsule lift. Stand by for PMC with the ship flight surgeon and Hawthorne flight surgeon.
On the
Dragon.
All right, great news there. So we got confirmation that those safety checks are complete. So we'll now see the recovery team begin to place the required straps and harnesses around, as you can see there, around the Dragon capsule. We also heard confirmation that the words that were used were unfired ordnance. Those are those pyrotechnics that are utilized to fire the parachutes at the appropriate time, so confirmation that those have been saved. And we also heard PMC, that stands for Private Medical Conference, and that is an opportunity to speak with the flight surgeon and to give a rundown on how the crew is feeling. as we mentioned earlier, we have 3 spaceflight rookies, although they're not rookies anymore now that they're back on Earth, and 1 veteran, so Michael Barrett, this is his, he has now completed 4 space flights, so it's a good opportunity even for everyone to check in with the surgeon and let them know how they're feeling, and of course that is private. Now, we did get that all clear for full approach. So, like I said, you can see that the team is beginning to rig up the spacecraft for the recovery by the recovery ship. That second fast boat, which we see coming in and out of screen, is responsible for parachute recovery and also serves as a redundant boat to the first fast boat. We'll also get to see a team member on a jet ski helping to gather up those parachutes that are now detached.
And it will take a little over 10 minutes for the recovery crew to complete their safety checks. But once complete, the crew will begin preparing Dragon to be lifted onto the recovery vessel. And again, we do see that rigging process underway. As part of the preparation for this lift, 1 member of the recovery team will climb on top of the spacecraft, as you see, so they can attach all those hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. So it does typically take us less than an hour to raise Dragon to the recovery boat and remove the crew from the spacecraft. And after medical checkouts, once on board, the crew will return to land within 4 hours by helicopter.
Dragon to ground is now public.
Copy, Dragon, copy.
So after they return to land by helicopter, the crew will fly by plane back to Houston, where they will be reunited with their friends and their family, and then complete their post-flight period. And so again, we were getting some great views of Crew-8 after they splashed down. We'll probably get some more great views here momentarily, but everything went very, very smooth this morning. The crew did splash down off the coast of Florida at 12:29 a.m. Pacific time this morning, following their undocking from the International Space Station yesterday. They did have a 34-hour time period in which they were returning back to Earth, now back home safe and sound after 235 days in space, 3 of whom it was their very first time in space. And so this is a view of Mission Control here in Hawthorne, California. The core was the main individual that has been speaking with the crew following their undocking from the International Space Station yesterday. We'll continue to hear some of those calls back and forth from the core, the crew operations resource engineer here at Hawthorne. Particularly to Matt Dominic. He is the commander of Crew Dragon Endeavour, so he is the main astronaut that will speak with the core. And it looks like we are getting our first view there on the recovery vessel Megan. That circular object that you see in the center of your screen there, that is actually what we call the Dragon's Nest. That is where the Endeavour spacecraft will be lifted up and placed into. That's why we had to do that rigging ahead of this operation. We had to make sure that all of the harnesses were properly installed in order to hoist Dragon up into the Dragon's Nest.
Now, you mentioned communicating with the crew. We actually have a team member on board the Dragon, or excuse me, on board Megan, the recovery vessel that you see there. Shaniqua Vereen, we heard from her a little bit earlier during the just before splashdown. I can't wait to hear how the actual splashdown was. Shaniqua, can you fill us in on what it was to experience that?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
All right. I actually repositioned myself from the front of the boat to the back of the boat so I can see the Dragon's Nest and actually have eyes right now on Dragon Endeavour. Everything as far as splashdown was perfect. It was nominal. We could see the bright dragon in the sky coming back to Earth, and it was pretty extraordinary from my point of view. It's entered the atmosphere. We then heard 2 sonic booms, and then pretty soon after we saw some navigational lights, red and then green, and then we saw some parachutes deploy here on the Megan. We then tracked Dragon as it slowly propelled down into the ocean. From here, you guys have been following along a little bit more. I had some better views, I think, of you guys. We tracked the Endeavour down, and we actually saw the parachutes from the fast boat being dragged a little bit here as they were clearing out the area for us to be able to recover Dragon. Again, you guys went over a little bit, but after we got all clear, the fast boats went in to make sure that there was no hypergolic leaks, that propellant leaks, and then we're right now inching closer and closer to the vessel as we see. I don't know if you guys have views right now, but as we're inching closer, we're backing the Megan closer to the Dragon Endeavour where it sits right now in the ocean.
Yeah, Shaniqua,
Sorry, go ahead.
I think we have a very similar view currently as you. We are also looking off the aft end of the recovery vessel. We see a couple crew members there next to the Dragon's nest, and we can also see the Dragon capsule. So I have a feeling that you're standing pretty close to the camera we got views from.
Yes, absolutely. And Shaniqua, we have all been tracking this weather pretty closely throughout the return journey for Crew-8. From my perspective, those seas look like glass. Can you tell us about the landing conditions from your perspective?
Yes, so we had optimal conditions to actually bring Dragon home today and splash down off the Pensacola coast. The conditions have been more than favorable, I would say. We expected a little chill to be in the air. We're all buckled up in sweatshirts and hoodies here, and it's actually a smooth, like 76 degrees. Beautiful, calm ocean as well as clear skies tonight. We had a couple of the flight docs pointing out the constellations as we were waiting for Endeavour to actually come in view. So it's been pretty amazing and clear. Just blue water. I was looking for dolphins or jumping fish off the side of the boats this time. I had that view a couple recoveries ago, and didn't happen this time, but still quite a sight to view.
Oh, that is just so wonderful to hear, Shaniqua. I do hope you bring some of that cool weather back home to Houston for us both, and I hope you get the chance to see your dolphin too. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Best of luck to you with the rest of the recovery. We're going to continue to follow along and keep up those live views. But thank you again for joining us. That was Shaniqua Vereen, Public Affairs Officer at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. And so we are continuing to get these views of Endeavour as it gets closer and closer to the Megan recovery vessel. We're continuing to see some of those lights from the recovery personnel around the spacecraft, as well as some folks near the nest that will help with the actual lifting up process of bringing Dragon on board the Megan. And once Dragon is secure and on the recovery vessel, we'll actually see it scooch forward a little bit before the crew is actually removed from the spacecraft. But before that, we'll open up the hatches and we'll continue to walk through all of that. But I'm just glad that we are getting these great views.
Yeah, Shaniqua mentioned being able to see some aquatic life in the water. This is always fun to watch, folks, as we prepare the Dragon capsule to be lifted onto the deck of the recovery vessel. This is one of the moments that haunts my nightmares personally. Dark water, there may be, I know it's highly unlikely and it's one of those kind of like fear things, but to me there's sharks in there and other scary oceanic beasts, but I think Shaniqua, it has more luck with a dolphin than scary aquatic beasts. That's just, in my head, that's what's there. So we can see their recovery team members standing by as they have already begun to prepare to lower the vessel's hydraulic lift mechanism into the water, and that will help bring the spacecraft into that on-deck translation system, as you have heard us refer to as the nest. Dragon will remain in that nest during crew extraction and then for the journey back to port. So what is not super clear from this view, the Dragon capsule will be lifted into that nest, and then that nest will translate toward the camera that we are looking from now. So that nest will translate toward the forward end of the recovery vessel, and that is where the extraction platform is located. The crew we can see there in the background is continuing to prepare the Dragon capsule. We can actually see one of the recovery team members. This is probably the best view we've had of them so far, but we can actually see one of the recovery team members on top of the capsule helping to secure the rigging and the straps necessary to safely lift the Dragon capsule out of the water.
And once open, a SpaceX medical doctor will be the very first one to check in on Matt, Mike, Jeanette, and Alexander, just to see if they're ready for egress or getting out of the spacecraft. So Wall Dragon's top hatch is used to connect to the space station, and that's kind of that pointy part that you're seeing at the top of the spacecraft. On the other end is the heat shield. The top hatch is used to connect to the space station. The astronauts will egress from Dragon's side hatch, pending capsule orientation in the water, which, as we see, is in stable one, so they will be able to use that side hatch. But there are multiple options, so if Dragon were to splash down in a different orientation, they could egress from the top hatch as well. So either option works, but today we will be using that side hatch. Before opening the hatch, the spacecraft's cabin pressure must be equalized with the outside environment, but it actually is equalized because we're here on Earth. So once the hatch is opened, that will be the crew's first breath of fresh air since boarding Dragon at the start of their mission all the way back in March, which is hard to believe. That was almost 8 months ago.
Yeah, time does fly. So this is a cool view here. I believe this is a drone shot that we have, and you can really get a sense of distance between the recovery vessel and the Dragon capsule and the speed at which the recovery vessel approaches Dragon. It is slow and steady, carefully choreographed, as pretty much everything in spaceflight is. And we can see the recovery team in the fast boat still working to prepare Dragon Endeavour to be lifted out of the water. We heard during the we heard in the post-deorbit burn debrief that the weather was really good. We can see that here live on screen. The wave height predicted was 0.6, so really mild. We can see almost a glass-like surface there on the water, and only a wind speed of only 3 knots. So overall, a beautiful evening for a Dragon to splash down.
And we are getting some good visuals there of the helicopter pad on top of the recovery vessel Megan there. You can see the green lights of the helicopter pad. Once the crew is out of the spacecraft, they will depart back to the coast of Florida on board a helicopter before flying back to Houston and being reunited with their families at Ellington Field in Houston. So continuing to get those really great views there. It looks like the rigger is still on Dragon, if I'm seeing that correctly.
Yeah, they're standing in the bay where the main parachutes were housed prior to being deployed.
That's right, and it looks like that rigger this evening is Troy Werner. So we might get the opportunity to see him as he jumps off of the spacecraft, which is Kate's worst nightmare.
Yes. A moment I feel things for that individual when I see them perform that, and it's really admiration that they have the bravery to do that, especially at night. Yeah, we can see him standing there in that bay where...
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
Loud and clear, Hollis.
Loud and clear as well. Transition from audio from Tidris to Megan successful. Rigging has been complete. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
Copy, 5 to lift.
Great news there, just giving the crew an anticipated timeline for the remainder of the recovery preparations. That lift sequence will happen quite quickly, so be sure to not turn away. The Dragon capsule will be lifted up and out of the water using those hydraulic arms, or that lift that you can see there at the end of the recovery vessel on the left-hand side of your screen. It'll then be placed in the Dragon's nest, which will then be translated toward the forward end of the vessel. And that all happens really from the moment that the Dragon capsule is lifted out of the water, basically about a minute, if my memory serves me correctly from previous recent recovery operations, about a minute for the Dragon to be out of the water in the nest, and the nest to be translated to the forward end where the egress platform is located. Now, once the Dragon capsule is there next to the egress platform, we will perform another set of safety checks to make sure that there are still no hypergolic vapors present on the exterior of the capsule. So we'll do another one of those before allowing the team to open the side hatch. We can see the rigger there now atop the Dragon capsule. I wonder if they have the opportunity to kind of put their hand down there and wave. That is the side of the capsule where, oh, there they go, into the water.
Dragon, brace for capsule lift.
Dragon.
All right, lift now underway as we bring Dragon Endeavour out of the water. A great view from our drone. We can see the capsule now making its way toward the Dragon's nest, and there's a good view of that egress platform, so you get a better sense of how far that translation is. So you can see some seawater there resting in the main parachute bay. Once the Dragon is